My name is Justin, and I'm 56 years old. Right now, I'm sitting in the living room of a 4-bedroom house that I bought for my daughter Sarah with every penny I had. But here's the thing. Just 20 minutes ago, she sent me a text message saying I wasn't welcome at her birthday dinner because her husband doesn't want me there. After 24 years of sacrificing everything for that girl, working 2 jobs to put her through college and giving her this house as a gift, she's telling me I'm not invited to celebrate her 26th birthday. I stared at that message for a long time, and then I made a decision that's going to change everything between us. Forever. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will show you how one text message changed everything between a father and his ungrateful daughter forever. Trust me, you won't see this ending coming. I need to start from the beginning so you understand just how much I loved this girl. Sarah's mother, my wife Catherine, passed away from cancer when Sarah was only 12 years old. I remember standing at Catherine's funeral, looking down at this scared little girl, gripping my hand, and making a promise that I would be both mother and father to her. That promise shaped the next 14 years of my life. After Catherine died, I took on a second job, driving for Uber at night. My main job as a civil engineer paid decent money, but I wanted Sarah to have everything she needed. I worked from 7 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon at the construction company. Then came home, helped Sarah with homework, made dinner, and drove Uber from 8 at night until midnight. Saturday mornings, I coached her soccer team. Sunday afternoons, we went to the movies or the mall, whatever she wanted to do. I never dated anyone seriously during those years. Sure, there were a few women who showed interest. Nice women who understood I came with a package deal. But every time things got serious, I would think about Sarah. She was my priority. She needed stability, not some new woman trying to replace her mother. I turned down promotions that required travel. I said no to job offers in other cities, even when they came with bigger salaries. When Sarah turned 16, I taught her how to drive in the empty parking lot behind Walmart every Saturday morning for 3 months. The day she got her license, I surprised her with a used Honda Civic. Nothing fancy, but it was reliable and safe. I had saved for 8 months to buy that car, skipping lunches at work and cutting every corner I could find. High school graduation came, and Sarah had her heart set on State University. The tuition was $28,000 a year, not including room and board. I had some money saved, but not nearly enough. So I took out loans, picked up extra Uber shifts on weekends, and even started doing handyman work for neighbors. Sarah never knew how much I struggled to make those tuition payments. She just knew that when she needed textbooks, I bought them. When she wanted to join the sorority, I found the money for dues and formals. Sarah called me every day during college. We talked about her classes, her friends, her dreams of working in marketing for a big company someday. She'd tell me about professors she liked and boys she was dating. Nothing serious, just college relationships that came and went. I loved those phone calls. Even when I was exhausted from working 16-hour days, hearing her voice made everything worthwhile. The day Sarah graduated with her marketing degree, I sat in that auditorium bursting with pride. She walked across that stage, grabbed her diploma, and found me in the crowd. The smile she gave me in that moment made every sacrifice worth it. After the ceremony, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Dad. I know how hard you worked for this." Sarah landed a good job at an advertising firm 6 months after graduation. She moved into a nice apartment downtown, started making her own money, and began building her career. But she still called every few days, still came over for Sunday dinner. We had settled into this comfortable rhythm where she was independent, but we remained close. I thought things were perfect. Then she met Marcus. Sarah first mentioned Marcus about 3 years ago. She was excited talking about this guy she'd met at a work conference who was really successful and so sophisticated. He worked in finance, made good money, and drove a BMW. Right away, I could hear something different in her voice when she talked about him. She sounded impressed in a way that made me a little uncomfortable. The first time I met Marcus was at Romano's, this upscale Italian restaurant downtown. Sarah had suggested we meet for dinner so I could get to know him. I arrived 5 minutes early as always, and found them already seated at a corner table. Marcus was wearing an expensive-looking suit and checking his phone when I approached. Sarah jumped up to hug me, but Marcus barely looked up. "Dad, this is Marcus," Sarah said, her voice bright but nervous. "Marcus? This is my father, Justin." Marcus finally put his phone down and extended his hand, but he didn't stand up. His handshake was firm but brief, and his smile never reached his eyes. "Nice to meet you," he said, already reaching for his phone again. During dinner, Marcus dominated the conversation. He talked about his portfolio, his investment strategies, and his opinions on the real estate market. When I mentioned my work in construction, he nodded politely, but then launched into a lecture about how the construction industry was too dependent on manual labor and needed more innovative approaches. "Sarah tells me you raised her on your own," Marcus said at one point, cutting his steak with precise movements. That must have been challenging with limited resources. The way he said limited resources felt like a judgment. I explained that we managed just fine, that Sarah never went without anything she needed. Marcus nodded again, that same polite but condescending expression on his face. "Of course," he said, "though I imagine it's different when you can provide more comprehensive opportunities." Sarah kept trying to steer the conversation to lighter topics, but Marcus always brought it back to money or status. He mentioned his country club membership, his plans to buy a house in the suburbs, and his connections in the business world. Everything was about what he owned or who he knew. What bothered me most was how he treated Sarah. He interrupted her, constantly corrected her when she misstated some financial term, and made decisions for both of them without consulting her. When Sarah suggested we order dessert, Marcus said they needed to leave because he had an early meeting. He didn't ask what she wanted. After dinner, as we stood outside the restaurant, Marcus excused himself to take a phone call. Sarah and I had a few minutes alone. "He seems intense," I said carefully. "He's ambitious," Sarah replied quickly. "He's already made more money than most people our age. He's going to be a partner at his firm by the time he's 35. That's great, honey. But how does he treat you? That's what matters." Sarah's smile faltered for just a second. "He treats me fine, Dad. He's just focused. He has high standards." Something about the way she said high standards worried me. But Sarah was 24 years old, capable of making her own decisions. I decided to trust her judgment, even though my gut was telling me something was off about Marcus. Over the next few months, I watched my daughter change. She started dressing differently, more conservatively, more expensively. She stopped calling as often, and when she did, she seemed distracted. She began using phrases Marcus used, talking about optimizing things and leveraging opportunities. It was like she was slowly becoming someone else. The engagement happened fast. Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening, breathless with excitement, saying Marcus had proposed at some fancy restaurant. They wanted a spring wedding, something elegant, but not too big. When I offered to contribute to the wedding costs, Marcus politely declined, saying they wanted to handle everything ourselves. I should have seen it then. He didn't want my money because he didn't want my input. He was already working to separate Sarah from me, but I was too focused on her happiness to recognize the manipulation. About 6 months after the wedding, Sarah called me with news that made my heart soar. "Dad," she said, her voice full of excitement, "we found the perfect house. It's everything I've ever dreamed of." She described a 4-bedroom colonial in Maplewood, a suburb about 20 minutes from the city. White picket fence, big backyard 2-car garage, and a kitchen with granite countertops. The asking price was $420,000. "The only problem is the down payment," Sarah continued. "We need $84,000, and we're about $40,000 short. Marcus has been saving, but his student loans are still pretty high." I didn't hesitate for even a second. "Let me help," I said. "I have some money saved up." "Dad, no, that's too much. We can wait a few more years." But I was already thinking about the house I'd inherited from my parents 5 years earlier. It was a modest 3-bedroom in an older neighborhood, worth about $380,000, according to the recent appraisal. I'd been renting it out using the income to supplement my retirement savings. But hearing the joy in Sarah's voice made my decision easy. "Sarah, honey, I want to do this. Your mother and I always dreamed of giving you everything you needed. This is something I can do." 2 weeks later, I met with a realtor to put my parents' house on the market. It sold within a month to a young couple with twin babies. I took the proceeds, added $40,000 from my savings account, and called Sarah. "I can cover the entire down payment," I told her. "Consider it an early inheritance." Sarah cried when I told her. Real tears of joy, the kind I hadn't seen since her college graduation. "Dad, I can't believe you're doing this. Are you sure?" "I'm absolutely sure. This is what I want to do with my money." We spent the next few weekends house hunting together. Sarah would grab my arm. Every time we walked into a house, she liked pointing out features and talking about how she'd decorate each room. Marcus came with us sometimes, but he spent most of his time checking property values on his phone and talking to the realtor about investment potential. The house in Maplewood was perfect. Built in 1995, well-maintained with mature oak trees in the front yard and a deck overlooking the backyard. Sarah fell in love with the kitchen immediately. It had an island in the center, plenty of cabinet space, and windows that let in beautiful morning light. "This is it," she whispered to me as we stood in the living room. "This is my dream house." I handled all the paperwork and financial arrangements. When we got to the closing, I made a decision that felt right at the time. I put the house entirely in Sarah's name. She was my only child, and I wanted her to have the security of owning her own home. The lawyer asked if I was sure, and I said absolutely. The day Sarah got the keys, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I love you so much, Dad. Thank you for making this possible. I promise we'll take care of it forever." Marcus seemed genuinely pleased too, which surprised me. He shook my hand and thanked me for the generous gift. For the first time since I'd met him, he seemed relaxed around me, almost friendly. Sarah threw a housewarming party 3 weeks after they moved in. She invited all our family friends, neighbors, and her co-workers. I helped her hang decorations and set up tables in the backyard. Watching her play hostess in her own home, seeing how proud and happy she was, made every penny worth it. I settled into a new routine. Sunday dinners at Sarah's house became our tradition. I'd arrive around 2 o'clock with groceries and cook something special. Sarah would set the table with her good china, and we'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes Marcus joined us. Sometimes he had work or golf. I preferred the dinners when it was just Sarah and me. During the week, I'd stop by to help with small projects. I fixed a loose railing on the deck, installed new light fixtures in the dining room, and helped Sarah plant flowers along the front walkway. I loved feeling useful, loved being part of their daily life. I even downsized to a smaller apartment to make the house purchase easier on my finances. I didn't need much space, just a comfortable place to sleep, and a kitchen where I could make coffee in the morning. Most of my free time was spent at Sarah's house anyway, helping with yard work or just enjoying her company. For about a year, everything felt perfect. I had given my daughter the home of her dreams, and our relationship was stronger than ever. I thought I'd made the right choice, I'd secured Sarah's future and our bond. I had no idea that my generosity would eventually be used as a weapon against me. The first signs of trouble were subtle. During our Sunday dinners, Marcus started making comments about my frequent visits. Nothing direct, just little remarks about how independent couples need their space and how too much family involvement can strain a marriage. At Christmas dinner last year, Marcus dominated the conversation, with talk about his promotion and bonus. When I mentioned that I was thinking about retiring in a few years, he launched into a lecture about investment strategies and property management. "You know Justin," he said, cutting his prime rib with theatrical precision. "Sarah and I have been discussing our long-term financial goals. We're thinking about diversifying our real estate portfolio, maybe looking at rental properties or vacation homes." Sarah looked uncomfortable, like this was the first she was hearing about it. "We haven't really decided anything yet," she said quietly. "Of course we have," Marcus replied smoothly. "We talked about it last week. Remember, we agreed that this house could be an excellent foundation for building wealth." I felt a chill run down my spine. The way he said, "this house," made it sound like he'd forgotten that I was the one who made it possible for them to own it. Throughout the spring, I noticed Sarah becoming more distant. Our phone calls grew shorter and less frequent. She seemed stressed during our Sunday dinners, often apologizing for Marcus's absence and making excuses for his behavior. "He's been working really hard," she'd say, when Marcus missed dinner for the third week in a row. "His firm is expanding, and he's managing several new accounts." But I started noticing other changes too. Sarah stopped talking about her own work and achievements. She deferred to Marcus's opinions on everything, from what wine to serve with dinner, to what vacation destinations they were considering. It was like watching my confident, independent daughter disappear. Marcus began establishing what he called boundaries around my visits. Suddenly, I needed to call before stopping by. Sunday dinners were moved to every other week because they needed couple time. The casual weeknight visits for small projects became disruptive to their routine. One evening in July, I arrived for dinner and found Marcus setting up a new security system. He explained that they wanted to monitor who comes and goes for safety reasons. But the way he demonstrated how the cameras worked, pointing out that they recorded everything, felt like a warning. "It's amazing what technology can do these days," he said, adjusting a camera that had a clear view of the front door. "We can see exactly when people arrive and leave. Very convenient for keeping track of everything." Sarah seemed embarrassed by the whole display. She kept trying to change the subject, but Marcus was clearly enjoying making his point. The final straw came in September. I arrived for what I thought was our regular Sunday dinner, only to find Marcus's colleagues and their wives there instead. Sarah looked mortified when she saw me at the door. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I thought I texted you that we had to cancel today. Marcus invited some people from work over." I knew she hadn't texted me. I checked my phone constantly, but I just smiled and said I understood that we could reschedule for next week. As I walked back to my car, I heard Marcus's voice through the open window. "Sarah, we really need to coordinate better. I don't want any more surprise visits when we're entertaining." That night, Sarah called to apologize again, but something in her voice sounded different, defeated, like she was reading from a script. "Marcus thinks maybe we should make Sunday dinners monthly instead of weekly," she said, "just so we can have more flexibility with our social schedule." I agreed because I didn't want to make things harder for her. But I was starting to realize that Marcus wasn't just establishing boundaries. He was systematically cutting me out of my daughter's life, and somehow he'd convinced her to help him do it. The text message arrived on a Monday morning in October while I was drinking my coffee and reading the newspaper. My phone buzzed, and I expected to see something routine, maybe Sarah telling me about her weekend or asking if I needed anything from the store. Instead, I found this: Dad, Marcus and I decided you're not invited to my birthday dinner this Saturday. Marcus feels uncomfortable with your presence and thinks we need space. Please respect our decision. I stared at that message for a long time, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of the words. Sarah's 26th birthday was this weekend. We'd celebrated her birthday together every year since her mother died. It was our tradition, something sacred between us. My hands started shaking. I set my coffee cup down, but my coordination was off, and it rattled against the saucer. The sound seemed impossibly loud in my quiet apartment. 24 years. 24 years of putting her first, of working 2 jobs, of sacrificing every personal want and need to make sure she had everything. 24 years of being the only parent she had, and now her husband felt uncomfortable with my presence. I tried calling her immediately. The phone went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. I sent a text asking if we could talk, but there was no response. I spent the entire day writing and deleting messages. I wanted to ask her how she could do this to me. I wanted to remind her of everything I'd given up for her, everything I'd done to make her life better. I wanted to tell her that I'd bought the house she was sitting in, that every brick and board belonged to me originally. But every message I wrote sounded angry or desperate, and I couldn't bring myself to send them. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. The teenager who called me her hero. The young woman who cried with gratitude when I bought her dream house. Where was that Sarah? What had happened to my daughter? Tuesday passed with no word from her. Wednesday the same. By Thursday, I realized that Sarah wasn't going to change her mind. She'd made her choice, and it wasn't me. I started thinking about that house. The house I'd sacrificed my parents' legacy to buy. The house where I'd spent countless hours doing repairs and improvements, where I'd cooked dozens of Sunday dinners, where I'd felt like I belonged. Friday morning, I drove past the house on my way to work. I sat in my truck across the street, looking at the flower beds I'd helped plant, the deck railing. I'd fixed the driveway, where I'd taught Sarah to check her oil and change a tire. Marcus's BMW was in the garage. Sarah's Honda was in the driveway. Both cars paid for with jobs they had, because I'd supported Sarah through college. Both cars parked at a house I'd bought with my life savings and my parents' memory. That's when I realized what I had to do. If I wasn't welcome in that house, then maybe Sarah and Marcus shouldn't be living in it either. I called my lawyer friend Tom that afternoon. I need to ask you about something, I said. If I buy a house and put it in someone else's name, but I have all the documentation showing I paid for it, what are my legal options? Tom was quiet for a moment. That depends on several factors. Did you gift the house, or was there an understanding about repayment? Do you have documentation of the financial transaction? What does the deed say? I explained the situation to Tom, how I'd paid the entire down payment and put the house in Sarah's name as what I thought was a gift to secure her future. But I also told him how I was being systematically excluded from her life, how I was being disrespected and dismissed. Justin, Tom said carefully, legally speaking, if you can prove you paid for the house, and there's any ambiguity about the nature of the transaction, you might have grounds to reclaim the property. But this is your daughter we're talking about. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Saturday morning came. Sarah's birthday. In another timeline, I would have been getting ready to take her to brunch, just the two of us, like we'd done every year since she turned 18. Instead, I was sitting in my apartment uninvited and unwanted. That's when I made my decision. I pulled out my phone and typed a message that would change everything between us forever. I sat with my phone in my hands for 10 minutes before I sent that message. Once I hit send, there would be no going back. This would either wake Sarah up to what Marcus had done to our relationship, or it would destroy what was left of our bond forever. The message was simple and direct. Sarah, since I'm not welcome in the house I bought for you, I'll be reclaiming it. You have 30 days to move out. Legal papers will arrive Monday morning. I sent it at exactly 11:30 Saturday morning, right about the time she would be getting ready for her birthday dinner, the dinner I'd been excluded from. My phone started ringing within 5 minutes. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. Voicemail again. Then came the text messages. Dad, please call me back. We need to talk about this. Dad, you can't be serious. This is my house. Please don't do this. We can work something out. I turned my phone off and drove to Tom's office. He was waiting for me, even though it was Saturday, because I'd explained how urgent this was. I have all the documentation, I said, spreading the papers across his desk. Bank records showing the wire transfer for the down payment. Proof that I paid the closing costs. Records of the sale of my parents' house to fund the purchase. Tom reviewed everything carefully. This is pretty clear-cut, he said. You funded the entire purchase. The house being in Sarah's name doesn't change the fact that you can prove you paid for it. If you want to reclaim the property, you have legal standing. What's the process? I'll prepare a notice of claim and have it served Monday morning. They'll have 30 days to respond or vacate. If they want to fight it, we can go to court. But honestly, with this documentation, I don't think they have much of a case. Do it, I said. Monday morning, a process server delivered the legal papers to Sarah's house. I know because Tom called me at work to confirm delivery. It's done, he said. The clock is ticking. My phone had 47 missed calls and 63 text messages by the time I turned it back on Monday evening. Sarah had left voicemail after voicemail, her voice progressing from confused to angry to desperate to heartbroken. In one message, she was crying. Dad, I don't understand why you're doing this. This is my home. Please call me back so we can talk. In another, her voice was harder, more controlled. I could hear Marcus in the background. You can't just take someone's house because your feelings are hurt. We'll fight this. But by the last few messages, Sarah sounded broken. Dad, I know I messed up. I know I should have invited you to dinner, but please don't take my house. Please don't destroy everything over one mistake. One mistake. That's what she called it. Months of being pushed out of her life, of being disrespected and dismissed, and she called it one mistake. I didn't return any of the calls. I'd said everything I needed to say in that legal notice. Tuesday. Marcus left me a voicemail. His voice was cold and threatening. Justin, this is Marcus. What you're doing is completely unreasonable and probably illegal. Sarah is devastated. If you think you can bully us into submission, you're wrong. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. Wednesday. I got a call from Sarah's boss then, from two of our family friends. Word was getting around about what was happening. Most people were shocked, but when I explained the situation, when I told them how I'd been treated and excluded, they understood. You gave that girl everything, said Mrs. Patterson, who'd known Sarah since she was a baby. If she can't appreciate that, maybe she needs to learn the hard way. Thursday, Sarah showed up at my work. I saw her through my office window sitting in her car in the parking lot. She looked like she'd been crying for days. Part of me wanted to go out there to hug her and tell her everything would be okay. But I remembered that text message, the coldness of being dismissed from her birthday, and I stayed at my desk. She waited for 2 hours. Finally, she got out of her car and came into the building. My secretary buzzed me. "Your daughter is here to see you. Tell her I'm not available." Friday, exactly a week after I'd sent that first message, I got a call from Tom. "They want to negotiate," he said. "Marcus called my office asking if there's some kind of financial arrangement we'd consider." "What kind of arrangement?" "He wants to know if you'd accept monthly payments instead of reclaiming the house. Basically, they want to buy the house from you over time." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. No. If they want to buy a house, they can apply for a mortgage like everyone else. This house is mine, and I want it back. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I didn't hear from Sarah directly, but I heard from everyone else. Her co-workers, our neighbors, even the mailman asked me if the rumors were true. I stuck to my decision even when people told me I was being too harsh, even when my own doubt started creeping in late at night. Then, on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after I'd sent the legal notice, Tom called with news that changed everything. "You need to hear this," he said. "Marcus filed for separation yesterday. Apparently, all the stress from the house situation has been too much for their marriage." I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction, because Marcus's true character was finally showing, and sadness, because Sarah was about to learn a very painful lesson about the man she'd chosen over her father. Saturday marked the end of the 4th week, 3 days before the 30-day deadline. That's when Sarah finally called me, and this time I answered. "Dad?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper when I picked up the phone. "Please, we need to talk." I could hear in her voice that everything had changed. Gone was the defiance, the automatic defense of Marcus, the dismissive tone I'd gotten used to over the past 2 years. She sounded like the scared 12-year-old girl who'd lost her mother. "Okay," I said. "We can talk. Can I come over? I'm sitting in your parking lot." When I opened my apartment door, I barely recognized my daughter. She'd lost weight, her eyes were red and puffy from crying, and she was wearing an old sweatshirt I remembered from her college days. She looked fragile, like a strong wind could blow her over. She sat on my couch and started crying before she said a word. Deep, painful sobs that shook her whole body. I wanted to comfort her, but I also needed to hear what she had to say. "Marcus left me," she finally managed to get out. The day the legal papers arrived, everything changed. He started talking about how this whole situation proved that our families were incompatible, that he couldn't be married to someone whose father was so erratic and controlling. She wiped her nose with a tissue from the box I handed her. He said he'd been having doubts about our marriage anyway, that he felt trapped by my emotional baggage and your constant presence in our lives. He moved out Wednesday. I felt a surge of anger toward Marcus, but also a bitter satisfaction. This was exactly what I'd expected from him when the money pressure mounted. "Dad, I know you're probably thinking you told me so, and you'd be right. I was so blinded by what I thought Marcus represented that I couldn't see how he was changing me, how he was pulling me away from the people who really loved me." Sarah looked around my small apartment, taking in the modest furniture and the few family photos I'd managed to squeeze into the limited space. "You downsized for me, didn't you? So you could afford to buy us the house." I nodded. There wasn't much point in denying it. "I didn't know. Marcus told me you probably had plenty of money saved up, that the house purchase wasn't a big deal for you. I should have asked more questions. I should have realized what you were sacrificing." She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. "The worst part is how I treated you. Marcus kept telling me that you were too involved, that healthy families have boundaries, that I needed to choose between being a wife and being a daddy's girl. He made it sound like loving you was somehow wrong or unhealthy. Sarah, I said gently, I need you to understand something. It wasn't just one text message. It was months of being pushed out, of being made to feel unwelcome in the life I'd helped build for you. The birthday dinner was just the final straw. She nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I know. I can see it now. I can see how gradually he convinced me that you were the problem, that your love and support were actually controlling behavior. He was so subtle about it that I didn't realize what was happening until he was gone, and I was sitting alone in that house, realizing that I'd driven away the one person who'd never asked for anything except to be part of my life. We talked for 3 hours. Sarah told me about the pressure Marcus had put on her to distance herself from me, how he'd criticized everything from my working-class background to my old-fashioned parenting style. She admitted that she'd been miserable for months, but convinced herself that marriage required sacrifices. I kept thinking that if I could just make Marcus happy, everything would work out, she said. But nothing I did was ever enough. He always had some new criticism, some new way I needed to improve or change. By the time she left that evening, we'd cried together, hugged, and started the process of rebuilding our relationship. But I still had a decision to make about the house. The next morning, I called Tom. I want to modify our approach, I said. Instead of taking the house back, I want to sell it and split the proceeds with Sarah. She can use her half for a fresh start. Are you sure you have every right to reclaim the entire property? I'm sure. The point was never to punish Sarah. The point was to show her that actions have consequences and that respect goes both ways. When I told Sarah about my decision, she broke down crying again. Dad, that's more than fair. That's more generous than I deserve after how I treated you. You deserve a fresh start, I told her. And I want you to have the resources to build whatever life you want, free from anyone who doesn't appreciate who you are. The house sold quickly for $435,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage and closing costs, there was enough left for each of us to start over. Sarah used her half to put a down payment on a small townhouse closer to her work. I used mine to buy a comfortable 2-bedroom condo in a community with other retirees. For the first time in years, we were both living within our means and making our own choices. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. Marcus tried to claim half the house proceeds, but since the house had been in Sarah's name and she could prove I'd funded the original purchase, he had no legal standing. He moved to another city for a new job and disappeared from our lives completely. Sarah and I now have dinner together twice a week, sometimes at her place, sometimes at mine, sometimes at a restaurant. We talk about everything: her work, her dreams, her dating life, when she's ready for that again. The difference is that now our relationship is based on mutual respect and genuine desire to be in each other's lives. She's started therapy to work through the emotional manipulation she experienced with Marcus. She's learning to trust her own judgment again and to recognize the difference between healthy boundaries and controlling behavior. Last month, Sarah called me with an update that made me smile. Dad, I got a promotion at work. They're making me senior account manager, and I negotiated a 15% raise. That's wonderful, honey. I'm proud of you. The best part is that I did it all on my own. I didn't need Marcus to coach me or tell me what to say. I just trusted myself and asked for what I deserved. And that conversation reminded me why I'd fought so hard to get my daughter back. Not the girl who'd been molded into someone else's image of the perfect wife, but the strong, independent, capable woman I'd raised. Looking back, I realized that taking back the house wasn't really about the money or the property. It was about showing Sarah that she had a choice. She could continue down the path of letting someone else define her worth, or she could reclaim her independence and rebuild the relationships that truly mattered. Sometimes, the people we love most need to lose everything to remember what's really important. Sometimes, being a good parent means making the hard choice that feels cruel in the moment, but serves love in the long run. I learned that it's possible to love someone so much that you enable their worst choices. For 2 years, I watched Marcus systematically isolate my daughter from me, and I didn't fight back because I was afraid of losing her completely. But staying silent didn't preserve our relationship. It just delayed the inevitable confrontation. Family isn't just about blood or shared history. It's about mutual respect, genuine affection, and the willingness to show up for each other consistently. Marcus never understood that. He saw relationships as transactions, as opportunities to gain advantage or control. But real love, the kind that lasts through hardship and misunderstanding, isn't about what you can get from someone. It's about what you're willing to give, not because you have to, but because their happiness matters to you as much as your own. Sarah and I are rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and respect. We both learned that love without boundaries isn't healthy, and boundaries without love aren't sustainable. Finding that balance has made us closer than we ever were before. I don't regret the decision to reclaim the house. It was the wake-up call Sarah needed to see what her marriage was doing to her and to our family. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to save what really matters. The most important lesson I learned is this: never let anyone convince you that your love and generosity are burdens to be managed rather than gifts to be treasured. The right people will appreciate what you bring to their lives. The wrong people will always find reasons why it's not enough. Today, I'm 67 years old, and my relationship with my daughter is stronger than it's been in years. We've both learned to value what we have instead of taking it for granted. And that's worth more than any house or any amount of money I could ever give her. If you've made it this far in my story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to save a relationship that mattered to you? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Sometimes we all need to hear that we're not alone in facing these impossible choices. Please hit that like button if this story made you think about your own family relationships. Subscribe for more real stories about life, love, and the complicated choices we all have to make. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries, even with the people you love most. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that real love sometimes requires tough choices, and that fighting for the people who matter is always worth it in the end. Take care of yourselves and the people you love. Life is too short to spend it walking on eggshells around people who don't appreciate your heart.